now. Okay, so hi everyone. We're going to get started today with just a quick overview of what the Gaucho space looks like. I did some cleaning up of it. You'll see that it's broken down day by day. For each day, you can see the readings, then you can see the lecture link. The lectures right now are just for YouTube, so you can see the video. If there are a lot of requests for specific PowerPoints or specific information, regarding a day, I can figure out how to condense that information for you and make it so that you don't have to keep watching the lecture over and over and over again to get the information that you need. So if that becomes a bigger issue, just let me know, and I am just here to make things easier for you. All right. So we had a question in the chat about the response paper for this week. So you can see it right here. I'm going to make it visible like this every week so you can quickly reference it. So for this week, you will reflect and respond to a set of questions regarding that week's readings. Your response should be a page and a half to 2 pages, or about 500 words or so, to be submitted here, right here on Gaucho Space. So consider sources we have read and watched for the week in lecture. While a works cited page or proper MLA, APA, Chicago, etc. formatted citations are not needed, I will say that successful responses will consider multiple sources from class material and lecture. So what that would look like is, you don't have to figure out the citation for this this lecture from the National Park Service on the Lone Woman of San Nicolas Island, but you could say in the lecture on the Lone Woman of San Nicolas Island, this, and this when answering these questions. So keep in mind that I pushed the due date back because I was late in posting this. So these are due on Friday, June 25th at 11:59 p.m. And I want you to consider both of these questions and then put it in a PDF or docs file as a way to answer it. So my 2 questions are, what can understanding Californian flora and fauna do for our understanding of California history? So how can considering non-human centered history help us better understand human-centered history? So how does bringing the quote unquote natural world with plants and animals, how do those things help us understand the human-centered history that we're talking about in California? And again, we are only 1 week into it. We are thinking about this as an approach. We are not you don't have to make connections to source material that we haven't talked about or anything like that. I will answer all the questions in the chat when I'm done talking on the screen. So the second question that I want you to consider is, what can studying local Santa Barbara history do for our understanding of broader Californian history? So is this a contrast to the big or deep historical approach to history that we discussed on Tuesday, or is it a similar kind of deep history? So remember, big or deep history is taking one, well, it can be taking one place or one commodity or one plant or one animal, and then looking at the long history of how it got there, which, so my example yesterday is, when I trace redwoods, it takes me all over the world, even though it's like a California plant, which would mean that it would be technically a California history. So a big or deep history could be that way, but also a big or deep history could be looking at things in a more broader sense, looking at all sorts of different things, like a geologic process, for example, and looking at how that formed over time and how long that took. But that isn't a specific place or a specific location, et cetera, et cetera. So we're talking about, so this question is asking you to think about, how is Santa Barbara history, considering Santa Barbara history, a big or deep history, or is it slightly different? So there isn't a right answer to this. I was more just leaving wiggle room for some of these folks because I know this is an upper division class. Some of you folks may have experienced big or deep history in other classes and have different understandings to it. I was telling Doug before class, we had a quick little meeting, that my understanding of big or deep history is definitely one where you start with one species, or you start with one place and then you go all the way back. But you don't necessarily have to understand it that way. If you do understand it that way, I want you to think about how using Santa Barbara as that one thing that we go way back and we consider the long history of it, how that could be useful for our understanding of broader Californian history. So I hope that helps. I hope that makes sense. I'm going to stop sharing just for a minute, just because I saw some questions in the chat. Andrew asked, do we need to cite lectures? You can just say in lecture 2 or something. You don't have to properly cite it, like I said, but if it's helpful, yeah, I would say that mentioning that would be great. Grace asked, you do not need a works cited page. Yes, thank you. Brian asked, the normal due date would usually be Thursday, but I am okay. And Andrew, you guys are just on top of it. Okay, but buddy. Philip asks, is there a difference between big or deep history? These terms are these terms interchangeable? They're technically, they started off as different things, but now, but that was about 40 years ago. Historically, as we use them now, they're pretty interchangeable. They're just looking at, it can be called deep time or big time when we talk about approaches to teaching history, especially K through 12 classes or global survey classes especially are starting to use this more and more. And while this isn't, for that reason, while it isn't necessarily an approach that is always applied to a more specific history like what we're doing in this class, I still think that it can be useful. And I'm interested to see the connections that you all make. And then Nick asked, I think GotchaSpace says it's due. So yes, so this week it is due Friday at 11:59. Usually it will be due Thursday at 11:59. So I hope that answers all of the questions. I'm sorry if you hear my 2 dogs like play wrestling. Everything will be beautiful. Nothing will hurt. We don't have any other questions. I'm going to get started with lecture. Sweet. Okay. We're going. We're vibing. We're jiving. All right. Is this the correct PowerPoint? Oof, what a treat, what a dream. Okay. Nope, that isn't what I want at all. You're spoiling everything, PowerPoint. Okay, well, I guess PowerPoint decided that this was going to be our first slide. And as you can see here, this is what used to be Beringia. This was brought up in the video that you hopefully watched today. And this was a land passage that was a large part of how, I mean, depending on who your archaeological friends are, this is a big reason why humans were able to get to the land mass that's now known as North America today. Why? Okay. Okay, so we're doing this again because timescales are different for different populations. So last lecture we talked about the Gregorian calendar. So we are in the year 2021, Common Era, and this is, you know, we use this. UCSB uses it. Most everyone uses it that we know in this in this time right now, because it is how modernity how capitalism, how all of these big forces that are a part of, I'm going to assume, everybody's life in this class at least, that is the calendar, that is the schedule that we are all on. But some groups do not subscribe to this perception of time. My example yesterday was, of course, a redwood tree. I cannot help myself. You know, these trees, you know, our lives can only, some of our lives can only be, you know, maybe between here to here for this redwood, but you know, its whole life was actually this. There are different groups of people who have different calendars. For example, the Jewish people are in the year, I think it's 6,000 something. There are different there are just different calendars all over the world. There are different conceptions of time. And this is probably the last lecture where we're really playing with this idea of big history, uh, big big time, deep time, and we're going deep. And I've taken you all the way to Beringia. So I hope that by doing this, we can kind of not necessarily push back against the Gregorian calendar. I don't know how, I don't have any like issues with it. What I have issues with is the presumption that everybody subscribes to all of the same things, with which just isn't the case. All of these, even the big forces like modernity or capitalism, are all historical processes that were not inevitable in any sense of the word. So this is why we're doing a deep dive, and I hope you're at least having fun. So the first half of this lecture is going to be me talking a bit more about Beringia, folks getting to the landmass that is now considered the North American West. I think Buddy's going to start barking in a minute. Oh, look at him not. We're going to start with how folks got to the North American West. Then I want to problematize some of the terms that we use when we talk about folks coming to that portion of the continent. Then we're actually going to watch a 20-minute video created by a Siexton group. So Siexton was the first name of Santa Barbara, used by the Chumash people, and it's a 20-minute video by the community about an art installation that they made called the Siexton Story Circle, that talks about their cosmology, so their belief system, but also their belief system is deeply entrenched with their history, which goes back at least 9,000 years. So I am including this in lecture and not as something to watch before, as a sign of respect that these the folks who are sharing their story, you know, know it far better than I can or ever will, and I want to use class time to kind of represent that. So that's our plan for today. I will answer questions that pop up in the chat after the video, so because otherwise I will get distracted, and we all know that I'm already easily distracted with my dog. So some background information. Anatomically, modern humans appeared sometime around 300,000 years ago. One of the several closely related primate species, they almost went extinct several times. So so I was just talking about modernity, capitalism, these cultural forces that make our daily lives. Our daily lives, our bodies were also not, at least from the point of view of archaeology, from the point of view of different kinds of human sciences, these weren't inherently, you know, just kind of mandated either. Like humans didn't have to happen. How we look right now wasn't inevitable. This was also a multiple what is the word I'm thinking of? This was just a very long process to get to where we are today. So we being humans emerged from Africa at least 70,000 years ago. Then we reached South Asia by 50,000 years ago, Australia and Europe 40,000 years ago, and the Americas at least 15,000 years ago. So from the Americas, then this is just kind of because we have a good map for it. From what's now the East Coast, there's movement towards the West Coast, and that's how the Chumash arrived to the place that is now known as like LA, North LA coast, and up to San Luis Obispo coast about 9,000 years ago. So this is called the dispersal of Africa. This can also be called the Great Migration, though the Great Migration also refers to another historical process in the US where African American people left the South and moved north. So I'm choosing to use the dispersal from Africa. And that was, this is just kind of a side note, this probably led to the first wave of something called the sixth mass extinction that began 40,000 years ago, and then additional waves occurred later. So spoiler alert, we are currently in something called the sixth mass extinction of life on Earth right now, which is mostly been caused by people spreading out over the world. If you want more information, I would love to bore you with, well, hopefully engage you, but potentially bore you with way too much information on the geologic time period that we're in right now called the Anthropocene. Here's another map that we can kind of see where literally where California is now, and we can see that there is this theory called the coastal route theory that was supported by the work in Clovis, New Mexico, arguing that this happened, that folks came from this way. We can also see another theory called the Atlantic crossing theory. Clovis, Beringia, there are all of these different theories, as you can see here. These two are the ones that are most used, to my knowledge, the ones that are most readily believed in archaeological and geological circles, or at least the ones that I high five in the humanities and social sciences building whenever we're in person. So yeah, I do have to say that there are multiple other theories. I do not know enough to say how some of these theories probably work together, but they probably do. Today, we're mostly going to be talking about these two, and then we'll cut to Seaxton and get started on our deep Santa Barbara history. So Beringia, Clovis, a lot of, like all of these theories really are coming from archaeological work that kickstarts mostly in the 19th century. So you have the professionalization of natural science beginning in the late 1700s. Don't worry, this will not be on a quiz. You have archaeology starting to do work in the 19th century, so around 1830s, 1840s in Europe. As people move west, as the U.S. West becomes settled and then becomes a state, or different sets of states, right? You have different, mostly European American scientists who are doing archaeological work to understand the past. The most famous one is in Clovis, New Mexico. Here is a site, and this is where scientists found proof that these first Americans, these first people, were the Clovis people. Of course, Clovis is coming from the modern name. We do not know what these people called themselves or thought of themselves as, which can be an issue, because yeah, they were named after their archaeological site. They were not, we do not have enough information about them at this point to know anything else. And we know that they walked across the Bering Land Bridge, or Beringia, and spread into what's now known as the United States about 13,500 years ago. So how did Beringia even happen? We have a Bering Strait now, that's all water. How did that happen? Well, it was an ice age. So during the ice age, you have changes in climate causing the formation of huge amounts of ice coming from the surrounding seas. If you have seas that are freezing, it must be very cold. And so you have woolly mammoths, you have giant sloths, you have really cool animals that don't exist anymore and were featured in the 2002 classic Ice Age. If you have not seen it, it was very funny at the time. I do not know if it holds up now. But you have in Beringia, in this passage, you had all sorts of huge animals that were through processes of evolution were not only very strong, but very covered in fur and very large, which was useful because we also had humans who were crossing and they needed that protein. If they were able to hunt one of these animals, they needed that protein in order to not only feed themselves, but use the fat to make fires, to make other resources that they need to survive the temperatures, including using different animal fur and hair to, fit their needs. So all of that is to say, this freezing caused the sea levels to fall and coastlines to change. And so during this time, there was a 12-mile wide, 100-mile long land bridge, so Beringia, and we're talking about 40,000 BCE to 10,000 BCE. So I left it as BC, but in history, we usually use BCE before Common Era and CE Common Era. However, BC, it means before Christ, and but it's interchangeable with BCE. Same with AD and CE. AD is Annie Domine, which is also a Latin thing. I am unsure what it means, but that is interchangeable with CE Common Era. Again, that Gregorian calendar mandating our lives. So this is, again, Beringia. It was located on where the Bering Strait is today, between Russia and North America. So now the Bering Strait is the waterway that separates Russia from North America. And so under it lies a submerged landmass that connected Asia and North America. But yeah, it is deeper down and cannot be used today. So this crossing of the Arctic Ocean, so you had the earliest people on the continent's landmass crossing the Arctic Ocean from Asia to North America, again, between 11,000 BCE to 9,000 BCE. These Native Americans, will problematize that in a minute, walked across the land bridge, slowly migrating south, eventually establishing three of the earliest distinct cultures that at least we through science know today, which is the Inuits, the Anasazi, and the mound builders. Why does PowerPoint never go when I want it to? Okay. Again, sorry, I needed to include one of my favorite stills from this 2002 classic Ice Age. The Ice Age eventually ended, and all of the ice began to melt, and that made this passage disappear. So at the end of the Ice Age, approximately 10,000 BCE, temperatures began to rise and ice began to melt, and eventually the water that covered this 12-foot wide land bridge that people had been using, that were created by glaciers, was no longer passable. It was no longer useful and eventually disappeared. Sorry, you're likely hearing my happy dogs be happy. So then we have moving across this landmass that we now know as America. So people chose different lifestyles based on the climate, food sources, and movement. I mean, similar to now. We just, hopefully, if we have the resources and agency to do so, we decide where we want to live based on similar things too. It all has to do with choice and how much choice we're able to have. Further, some chose to stay in the north because they wanted to hunt, and some went south because of the soil, because of the rich geology that had made the soil so great for farming small plants. We have a big culture of agriculture starting in the south of the continent that is now North America. And then we have a development of what we would call Native American cultures. So just some of these are Mayan, Aztec, Olmec, Zapotec, Mixtec, Huastec, Toltec, and the Incan empires. But here we have to stop because empire itself is complicated. When do we get to call something an empire? So the earliest example of empire is from historically that has been used is Rome, the Roman Empire. But these cultures are happening before that. These cultures are predating that, and so is it ahistorical to call them empires? What else could we call them? It's also complicated to use the word American here because the word America comes from an Italian name by I want to say Amerigo Vespucci, who ends up having 2 continents named after him. This is also ahistorical. This land came before him. There were people here before him. Why can't we use the name that they want to use? There is complications in saying the word Native American, but also Indian is also complicated, famously coming from Columbus making a mistake thinking that he's in India, but he was actually in what's now the North American continent. So what words do we use when we talk about these big civilizations who predate Rome? How do we talk about people, groups of people who predate anything that like what am I trying to say, that predate obviously Rome, but also historians talking about history. And part of the reason why I'm bringing up deep history, looking further back in time, is to problematize a lot of what history kind of makes assumptions about, and the assumptions of when history starts and stops. So yesterday we talked about prehistory and how that can kind of be itself problematic, and that is also part of this conversation. What words do we use to talk about people who obviously had their own history, but because we being white historians like myself are not part of the cultures who had this history, who continue to have this present and are working towards a future, what words do we use? And I was also talking to Doug about this before class, and there isn't a clear answer to it. There isn't a definite answer to it, but what I will say is that whenever we talk about a specific group of people, we use their specific name. So when we're talking about the Mayans, we say the Mayans. When we talk about the Chumash, we say the Chumash. when we talk about the Tongva, we say the Tongva. And next week, this will be visited again because we will be talking about a handful of different Californian indigenous groups a little bit more deeply. And in that case, I will be saying indigenous groups, indigenous peoples, because the resources and research that I have read that has been made by the Chumash, the Tongva, and other groups with this longer history and with this knowledge are using indigenous, at least when talking about California. So here we are. And now we're getting into the Chumash. So the Chumash people have been continuing to live on the land between Malibu and San Luis Obispo, that long stretch of land between mostly on the coast, but going more in east, and they've been doing that for at least 9,000 years. They've also been they were on the Channel Islands until 150 years ago, when the secularized mission system decided to, quote unquote, save those souls and take them off. But this is Chumash land. You can see that there are Spanish names that are attached to these different subgroups of Chumash that is related to the mission system, but it is still used today. So the Barbareño were tied to the Santa Barbara mission, Ventureño tied to the Ventura mission, I can never get this one out from my mouth. Parisemeño, the Parisima mission, etc., and etc. I cannot get the words out of my mouth right now. I've been working on German, sorry. So we can see that they were very widespread. They continue to be widespread, of course, but through different processes of colonization, different settlements made by different European groups. So starting with the Spanish, also, well, kind of the British for a half second, but mostly Spanish, and then the creation of Mexico, and then eventually the US. There have been different what we can historically call empires that have tried to control this land and move its people around, but they still continue today. And because they still continue today, we can see them in their traditional seaworthy boat. It's called a tummel. It is made out of, I bet you wouldn't guess I'd say redwood, but it's made out of redwood. It is made seaworthy with the asphalt and all of the oil that comes out of the Santa Barbara Channel. And Chumash people are still making them and using them to get out to the Channel Islands today. They do that for at least one time every year, and you'll hear a little bit more about it now. So before I get into this, I did see a couple questions in the chat. I will break my promise and I will answer them now. Yeah, Donovan, I know it means Anno Domini. Okay, Year of Our Lord. Thank you. I have not been in Catholic school for a very long time. Brian asked, would you say that most of this information is factual and not much is left up to theory or idea? I believe that was about the different theories of land crossing. I do have to say theory because those are the words that they use. It is factual, right? It is factual insofar as we know through the different peer-reviewed, tried and true community that makes up science and scientific fact. But while, oh man, we're going to get into the philosophy of science right now. Science is the best information that we have at the moment, with the best processes that we have at the moment that are made through commensurability. So a whole community coming together and agreeing on different ways that processes work that lead to conclusions, and then they're building off of each other. So it is the best information that we have at this moment right now. However, new discoveries could change how we understand things. For the most part, from my understanding of archaeology and that kind of social science work, the discoveries that they're going to make aren't going to completely overhaul everything. Rather, it's going to fine tune what they already know. So I hope that helps. If you have further questions, you can put it in the chat and I will answer those after this. So this is a 20-minute video about the Syexton Story Circle. It was made by a community of elders who worked with other community members to create this beautiful mosaic that you can actually see in downtown Santa Barbara. And it's right by the ocean. I can get you an address if you're interested. But this video will walk you through the circle and talks about the stories that they're representing. It is very beautiful to see in person, but I think it's even more beautiful in a sense to be able to see it and also hear the voices at the same time, and that just isn't physically possible to do in a public historic commemoration like this is in person. So I really hope that you enjoy this. This is something that I just think is so cool, and without further ado, I'll get it started.
Haku, hello. There are three worlds we speak of. The world above, home of the sky people, those ancient ones who walked the middle world before us. The middle world, home of the Chumash and all the people of this earth. And the world below, the other world, where the Nunashush, the malevolent ones, live. Walk with us counter sunwise and hear our stories.
Before we came into being, when the animals were still people, this world was home to the first ones. Then the great flood came. All in this world perished. Only Makutiko, the woodpecker, survived. It rained. It rained a lot. It rained hard. This world disappeared into the water. Woodpecker cried out to his uncle, the sun. Katata, katata, tanikuti, tanikuti. Uncle, uncle, please see me. Please see me. I'm already dying of cold and I'm hungry. But the sun didn't hear him traveling up in the sky. One of Sun's daughters said to him, "What did your nephew say?" So the sun leaned down closer to the earth to hear him. Poor thing, said Sun to his nephew, and tossed him down 2 acorns, which Makutiko ate. Sun raised his torch, and the water went down, and Woodpecker warmed himself. But there were still no people.
After the flood, Schneelemoon, the sky coyote, sun, moon, morning star, and sloth, the eagle who knows all that there is to be, were discussing the middle world. Schneelemoon announced that there were to be people in the middle world again, and they should be made in his likeness, for he had the finest hands. Slow called a meeting, and all the animals came, night after night and day after day, presenting their case. Onokok, the lizard, was there also, but said nothing, just listened. At last, Schneelemoon convinced them that humans should have his hands, and so it was agreed. The next day, They all gathered around a great stone table in the sky. This table is said to be a table-like rock, perfectly flat on top, with such a fine texture that whatever touches it leaves an exact impression. Schneelemoen was just about to press his hand down on the table when Lizard came up very quickly and pressed a perfect handprint into the rock. Slow and Sun approved of Lizard's actions, so Schneelemoen could do nothing. It is said that the print is still there till this day.
The 4 Channel Islands are represented here. The island Tucan, San Miguel, is represented by an abalone shell. The abalone was put here in the mosaic to remind us of how precious and delicate this once abundant life form is, and how we must be mindful and active in its survival. Huitma, Santa Rosa, is here as a redwood driftwood. The old tomol builders would find the best wood for the tomos on Huitma.
Limu, Santa Cruz Island. The island poppy on Limu is both beautiful and magical. Coyote, Ashka'a, and lizard Onokok tell of island hillsides covered in golden poppies. Island poppies found no place else on earth. Flowers so beautiful that just the story of their beauty brought healing to the people. Ashka'a and Onokok said there were so many poppies that on a clear day from the mainland, the big island of Limu shimmered golden in the sun. And Anyapach, Anacapa Island, seen here as a closed poppy. Anyapach is said to mean mirage or illusion. Swirling in the white, blue, and red elements of the rainbow is a pictograph of the first tomol built on the islands and shows how that knowledge was carried over to us. On the golden sandy shores of the beach, there stands a woman chief. She was said to be a powerful ruler when Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo sailed here in 1542. Along the same coastline, we see a village. This depicts flourishing life as it was before many expeditions that came here. In the journals of one friar who came here with Bartola's expedition in 1769, he wrote there were hundreds of plank boats in the channel. He noted that Chumash men would beach land these boats called tomos. These tomos would be filled with hundreds of pounds of fish. The village men would lift these vessels out of the water and carry it to the chief's dwelling, where the chief would distribute it to the people of the village.
In 1786, the Santa Barbara Mission was established. The decision to create Spanish missions in California was political as well as religious. Many Indians came to the mission for hope of survival. Many were treated badly by the Spanish soldiers. Many others died of European diseases to which they had no immunity. In the very center of this red and beige circle with black arrows is the rose window of the Santa Barbara Mission. The rose window is a winter solstice window that was blocked off at the mission to obstruct the light of the sun. We have chosen to show it illuminated as we have taken back our traditional ways.
The red mortar in between the bricks represents the blood of the native people who built the missions in California. The radiating black arrows represent the scattering of all native California people. Many fled to surrounding tribes to escape this failing system. It forever altered our indigenous life way, but even more devastation was to come.
The end of the mission system was foretold in many ways. One is the telling of a bloodless revolt in 1801. A Chumash woman received a powerful vision from the earth. The message of the vision was to renounce Christianity, wash with specially prepared water, and go back to the old religion or die. She is seen here receiving the knowledge from the earth. Another story is the appearance of a celestial event in the sky, which signifies the revolt of 1824. This was a bloody one that affected all. The mission system ended in Santa Barbara in 1834. The end of the mission system in California is represented by 21 black dots, each representing a mission being carried away within the meteor tail.
The Tomo is built. They select a man of great valor and one who has fulfilled all of his obligations to the Brotherhood of the Tomo. This man they make captain. Such a man was Palatino. He had had a vision of Helek, the peregrine falcon, and because of this vision, he would see Helek again when in distress at sea. Palatino and his men took the 2 tomos to the sea with 3 men in each tomo. The men filled their tomos with fish and abalone. In the middle of the channel, the winds picked up. Land was difficult to sight. Palatino's crew was swept out of the tomo, and Palatino pulled them out of the ocean back into the tomo. Palatino called out to the other tomo to save themselves and dump their load of fish, but they refused and sank to the sea with all 3 aboard. Palatino stood up in his tomo and called out to Helek 3 times. The Helek appeared to them. Palatino called out to his men to follow the Helek eastward. They made it to the shore, but a big wave crashed on top of them and shattered the tomo to pieces. Palatino called the Brotherhood of the Tomo together in ceremony with much sadness and said, "I say to you now that I cannot fulfill my obligations to the Brotherhood. Now is the end. I say clearly that the time has come when the Tomo Brotherhood has ended." And so it was.
Under the Spanish and Mexican flags, they wanted the Indians to become citizens, gente de razón, or people of reason. With the coming of the Anglo-Americans in 1850, the Native American people were considered less than human. The gold rush wanted their land. Indians were indentured, and the government paid near $1 million for scalps. Government-sanctioned extermination. Who wanted to be Indian? The culture went underground. We are still here, and we honor our ancestors.
The Eliwun are powerful wizards who live in crystal caves at the bottom of the sea. In English, they're called swordfish. Once upon a time, Helek went fishing in the ocean with 2 mariners, Moot, the cormorant, and Hugh, the pelican. They were casting out a line when Helek saw a big sea bass. Helek got his harpoon ready quickly and threw it. But as he did so, he slipped and fell into the water. Just then, a swordfish happened by and seized Helek and carried him away. His 2 companions in the boat were looking all around, hoping to see him come to the surface again. But though they waited and waited, there was no sign of him, and they returned home sadly to Siuktun. The eagle questioned the comrades about what had happened, for eagle was Wot, or chief. "Where is my nephew? Where was he lost?" Coyote spoke up and said, "Abandon any hope that he will reappear. They have seized him and taken him away." And the chief asked, "What shall we do now?" "We must send someone to rescue my nephew Helek and bring him back again." Coyote protested that he was not the man for the job, but the chief ordered him to go. Moot and Hugh showed Coyote where Helek had gone overboard. Then he said goodbye to the boys and plunged into the water with the equipment he had gathered to take along on his journey beneath the sea. Coyote arrived at the bottom of the sea and began walking slowly along, looking about him. "Now, where will I find the house of the swordfish?" After walking quite a while, he finally came to the house, but it was closed up tight. Coyote found the door. Using tobacco he had brought with him, gave the door a little bit of the plant, and it opened to allow him to enter. After 4 days of challenges, races, and dangerous tricks at the hands of the swordfish, Coyote wins the right to bring Helek back up to the surface. Helek and Coyote return to their village. Coyote recounts the great difficulties he endured down in the village below the sea in order to win Helek back from the swordfish. And the Wot rewards Coyote with a house of his own. And Helek soon marries a woman of the village Siuktun, and they all lived happily for a long time.
The coyote coming up from the depths we liken to Quetzalcoatl, Fernando Labrado, who brought the Tomol out of slumber with recollections of his family's participation in the old Brotherhood of the Tomol. Quetzalcoatl built a Tomol for the San Diego World Expo. It was the notes from this that brought the Tomol culture forward into contemporary time, when the Helec was built in 1976 and a new Brotherhood of the Tomol was formed.
The first modern Tomol was built and launched in 1976 as a result of a joint venture between the Quabbahai Chumash and the Santa Barbara Museum of Natural History. The Brotherhood of the Tomol was revived, and the crew paddled her and circumnavigated the Santa Barbara Channel Islands on a 10-day journey, stopping on each island.
Every September, hundreds of Chumash people come together on the island of Limu, Santa Cruz Island, to celebrate our annual Tomol crossing. Each year when we gather in our circle on the shores of Limu, we are greeted by this incredible bird. We honor her spirit here.
Below her are animal and bird tracks. This reminds us of a time when the people of this world and the animals all spoke the same language and understood one another.
It is our belief that we must return to that. The animals understand and know the earth and her environment much better than we do.
September 8, 2001, 2 a.m. On the mainland, Elliott Woon's crew of 23 and the crews of 3 support boats rise and prepare for the 24-mile crossing to Anyapak, Anacapa Island first, and then on to Limu, Santa Cruz Island. We leave Channel Islands Harbor at 3:45 a.m. For the first 11-mile leg of the journey, we face 2 to 4 foot swells and even wind waves as we cross open ocean to the eastern end of Anyapak and the shipping lanes. The support boat radios ahead to the huge container ships, and the Elliott Woon crosses the channel safely. The last part of the journey is rough, and the Tomol starts leaking, requiring one paddler to bail water constantly. The design here comes from a very famous picture of the 2001 crew of the Elliott Woon under the Anacapa Arch. This historic crossing marked the first time in 150 years that the Chumash people returned to Limu as a community and received a Tomol at the village of Swahil.
Chumash basketry is regarded among the finest in the world. Baskets were and continue to be at the very center of daily Chumash life.
The yellow pattern was inspired by a 200-year-old basket found in the mountains of Santa Barbara. At the top of the basket, you'll see 7 Tomols woven into the design. Each represents a crossing we've done in modern times to the island of Limu.
Classified as hunter-gatherers for hundreds of years, our Chumash ancestors actually lived in a very complex and sophisticated society. Our calendar and our ceremonies are connected to the movements of the stars. Around the sand dollar, you will see the 5 positions of Ursa Major, Alilhui, the guardian stars, who travel counterclockwise around the North Star, protecting him.
Siatina, Siatina, Ilakakiwo, Akakiwo, Siatina wash, Sisatina, Akuti. Siatina wash, Sisatina, Akuti.
When we pass into the spirit world, the soul travels to Humkak, where the raven comes, a place out at Point Conception. In the old days, no one living ever went there unless it was to pray or make offerings.
When the soul reaches Humkak, it bathes and paints itself. Then it follows a light in the sky, west to the land of the dead. The soul comes to a place where there are 2 gigantic ravens perched on each side of the trail. Each peck out an eye as the soul goes by. But there are many poppies growing there in the ravine, and the soul quickly picks 2 of these and inserts them in each eye socket so as to see again immediately.
Just beyond lies a body of water with a bridge that the soul must cross to reach Shimilaksha. Once the soul has crossed the bridge, it is safe in Shimilaksha. There are 2 roads leading from the bridge. One goes straight ahead to Shimilaksha, and the other goes to the sun's house. The sun rises from the east and goes to the west. The old ones say that some spirits may choose to follow the sun and re-emerge in this world.
Thank you for walking with us and hearing a small piece of our story. To our community, this mosaic is beyond beauty the eyes can see. It touches our heart and our senses. These stories are alive. We are alive.
All right. I hope you enjoyed that. With the bit of time that we have left, I want you to take 2 minutes if you are here synchronously. Please use the chat feature and write which part of this story, which part of the Siexton story circle was your favorite, or which was most interesting, and just a quick reason why. So for example, I really like the Tummels, the different Tummel stories for a couple reasons. One, of course, Redwood, but I think it's really fascinating that the Brotherhood of the Tummel was able to come back because of plans that were used for a world fair. It just kind of shows the state of the world that we are in now, that in some ways, while modernity, capitalism, all of these cultural forces we were talking about earlier, created a lot of erasure, as we will get to tomorrow, especially, and a bit in the weeks to come. There can also be benefits that can help bring stories back, to work on not unerasing them, but to finding new ways to bring the past into the present. I also really appreciated that the video ends with talking about the future and Indigenous futurity, thinking about Indigenous folks as not being just part of the past, or like we were talking about earlier today and yesterday, being part of prehistory, but people who are in the present and in the future. So those are two of my favorite examples. I would love to see yours, and that is the attendance question today. So what was at least one of your favorite aspects of the Siexton Story Circle, and briefly why? Awesome. So I'm seeing things about Channel Islands. I'm seeing different symbols for each of the Channel Islands. Grace likes the portion of the earth is the Middle Earth where we all reside. Donovan, symbolism of the ravens plucking the eyes. Yeah, I think that's super interesting too. Yeah, there's similar to Nordic, but also Greek. Absolutely. I'm glad you picked up on that. Claire loved learning about the representation of the Santa Barbara mission. We will get into that way more tomorrow. Grace, Chloe, Andrew. I'm reading everybody's names out loud so you know that I am seeing this in the chat and that I am recording you as here. Edwin, sand dollars are very lucky. Yes, your parents are not alone with that. I know lots of folks who think that sand dollars are super lucky. Philip Animals, Caitlin, Isaac, Donovan. Donovan, that's a great question. Yeah, so you're wondering if there's a connection of these themes that were passed during mass migration. That's definitely a possibility. There, this is something that I am curious in myself. I do not know enough about to say, but I would hazard a guess that yes, that if this is much more of a religious studies scholars question, which is not my background, but I would say that as somebody who's really interested in the different histories and belief systems of folks, I'm personally very interested in mythology, which can be religion, but also can be also separate. These different beliefs of how the world works, especially related around death, do have a lot of repeat themes. So that is definitely something to think about. Donovan, Caitlin, Brian. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. I have Brian here, David, Diana, Ryan, Jazz, Bryce, Doug, Stevie, Andrew Tesler, Javier, Madison, Max, Giselle, Nick, Desdemona. Okay, if you haven't submitted your attendance question yet, make sure that you do so. Remember for next time, so tomorrow we are going to be doing we're doing a deep dive into Santa Barbara history, or where we're starting with Siuxton. We're also going to be talking about a couple other Chumash villages, particularly the ones on where UCSB is located. And then we're going to try to take it to the present. So you can see that some of these videos are less historical and more thematic. Santa Barbara is really understood to be a place of celebrities, of leisure, of weekend getaways, but it's also a place where people have lived and loved and laughed and died. Santa Barbara isn't just a weekend getaway for everybody, it's just a few people, right? So we're going to be looking at that thematically. And then this video is about the lone woman of San Nicolas Island. If you ever read The Island of the Blue Dolphins by Scott Odell, especially if you were in the California K through 12 school system, you may have read that in 4th grade. But this woman who was named by the Santa Barbara Mission Juana Maria. We don't know, we are unsure of her Chumash name, but she was abandoned on San Nicolas Island when the Santa Barbara missions were trying to clear out the Channel Islands. She was abandoned there for 18 years by herself. Then finally she was found by a Russian trader named Nidover. We'll get into this tomorrow too. And she lived in Santa Barbara for about a month, and then she died of dysentery. So we'll be getting into that history tomorrow. This is just an introduction to it. Like I said, our topic tomorrow is what is Santa Barbara? And remember that your weekly response is due by Friday at 11:59 p.m. on Gaucho Space. So I'm going to stop sharing now. Do we have any questions before I stop recording? Okay, I'm going to